The pandemic has had a profound impact on how companies need to leverage technology to develop new products and services. They need to rethink, reframe, and retool the way they do business quickly, both to survive and thrive. John Lightman is a partner and market leader with ISG, a global technology, research, and advisory firm. John, welcome to NewsPoint.
Thank you. Good to
You say it's time for many companies to hit the reset button. Tell us what you mean by that.
I think, obviously we've been through this period where COVID has meant that companies need to just focus on the next few hours, the next few days, what I would call kind of firefighting. And that's really taken companies away from the longer term vision that they were starting to develop beforehand or starting to implement. I think, my perception is we're kind of through the worst of that now, and companies now need to focus on what's their relevance in this new economy. How will they thrive? What will their products and services be? What elements of the way that we're, working now, remote working, et cetera, will remain? What will go back to how they were before? So that's what I mean with the reset.
So what are some of the trends that you're seeing right now?
So I think, companies are looking at a number of different lenses around this. One is they're looking at their organization to understand if it's structured in an appropriate fashion to be able to accommodate these swift changes that are going to come along. The second is, do they have the right sources of data, and are they able to leverage that data effectively? And the third is, do they have the right partnerships in place? And even if they have the right partnerships, do they understand how to leverage the power of those ecosystems?
So John, can you give us an example of what that kind of transformation looks like for a company taking this path?
Certainly. So, I'll give an example that predates COVID, but I think is as relevant today as it was then. You think about a medical device company that makes hospital beds. Historically, they would have sold those beds as an asset, and the healthcare providers would have bought them. Then the next kind of the next phase of that model would be to sell beds as a service and say, don't worry about investing, when you need new infrastructure, we'll just give you a monthly price for a bed. And when it's not fit for purpose, we'll replace it for you. That's kind of a business model that's maybe 3, 4, 5 years old. Then if you think about the next maturation of that, it's really around the data and the telemetry that comes from those hospital beds. So if you take that data, you can figure out trends, you can analyze it, and you can basically say, this is a patient that's likely to have an adverse event in the next 30 minutes. They're going to have a heart attack. Let's send a nurse or a doctor, a healthcare professional over to see that patient. So the data actually allows the healthcare provider to optimize their use of resources in a different way. Instead of doing rounds, now they can be more targeted and proactive. So if you think about it from the perspective of the medical device manufacturer, maybe they want to give away the beds for free, because then they become the only game in town for the data, and they want to monetize the data. But are they structured both from a technology backbone perspective and also from a business capabilities perspective to move from being a company that sells assets to a company that monetizes data?
And John, this is called a move towards enterprise agility.
Yes, well, enterprise agility is one way that companies are looking to address the speed to value question and tie all those things we've been talking about before together. So the concept really came out of IT, where software was being developed in kind of very long programs where requirements were being collected and painstakingly built and then tested. And generally when they arrived, they were not what the client was looking for. So the IT community came up with the concept of Agile, which is an iterative development model. And it's really been adopted in organizations to say, how can we operate at multiple speeds? How can we understand that R&D needs to spin up a new product faster, test it, whereas some parts of the business maybe don't need to. So enterprise agility is really just a kind of overarching term for how to think about structuring your organization to be effective in the new digital world.
Well, thinking about the complexity of all those moving parts, it must be quite a challenge for organizations. The team at ISG has been doing this for over 25 years. What's the advice that you would give to executives right now?
Yeah, well, we've been doing this for well over the amount of time that enterprise agility has even been a thing. But ultimately, what we bring to the table is data to understand, how effective are you as an organization? The example I give might be around, you wake up one morning and decide to become a long jumper, and you find a patch of sand and you jump. you look down and you're pretty impressed with what you've achieved, but you don't know whether or not you've beaten a world record, or whether, you know, you're never going to cut it as a long jumper, because you need the data. And if you think about the transformation that's going on, many companies don't have the metrics or the data to support where they're going to in the future. So that's one aspect. The second is around understanding those operating models, the agile model. There's obviously many clicks deeper beneath that around how do you actually build your organization, and then how do you transform them from what they are today, and think about the change management associated with bringing all of your employees along with you. And the final piece is really around managing the ecosystem. So, you know, all of these things require third parties that have capabilities that are in excess of what you can do within the four walls of your company. And as this, you know, this world develops, we're thinking more around co-innovation with these partners. So much more complicated forms of collaboration, not just a client or the service provider, you know, outsourcing services. So how do you build those ecosystems to add value? How do you structure them commercially? And ultimately, you know, what are they worth to your company?
Certainly a lot to think about. We thank you so much for sharing your insights with Newspoint today, John.
Thank you.